He thought I was just a meek housewife living off his shine, a useless ornament in his brutal world of finance. But when he wagered our life savings on his mistress to push me out, he did not know he was betting against the house. The split second he realized the one holding his company's fate was the wife he had just betrayed remains the single most satisfying moment of my entire existence. My name is Elena Vance, and at 32 years of age, I had mastered the art of becoming invisible. I sat across from my husband, Marcus Thorne. Amidst the hushed, sterile opulence of Le Bernardin, the air smelled of truffle and old money, a scent that used to intimidate me but now just smelled like stagnation. Elena, we need to talk about restructuring our domestic arrangement, Marcus said, his voice smooth, practicing the pitch he likely used on his board of directors. Beside him sat Sophia, his 24-year-old strategic advisor. She wore a dress that likely cost more than my first car and a smirk that cost her nothing. She sipped her vintage champagne, her eyes scanning the room as if she were the queen holding court, and I was merely the court jester being dismissed. Restructuring, I asked, keeping my voice flat, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Look, Elena, let's be adults here, Marcus continued, swirling his Pinot Noir, refusing to meet my eyes directly. I am evolving. My company is evolving. And frankly, you represent a legacy asset that no longer yields a return. You are a wonderful homemaker, but in this world, you are obsolete. He slid a thick, cream-colored envelope across the white tablecloth. It stopped inches from my water glass. Sign this. It is a generous severance package. $5,000 a month for 2 years. In exchange, I need total silence. The merger is happening in 3 weeks, and I cannot afford a messy divorce scandal to spook the shareholders. Sophia chimed in, tapping a manicured nail on the mahogany table. It is really for your own good, Elena. Marcus needs a partner who understands the velocity of modern capital, someone who can keep up with his vision. I did not look at her face. I looked at her hand. There, resting on her ring finger, was a pear-shaped diamond with an intricate platinum halo. It was the exact custom design I had shown Marcus 2 years ago for our 10th anniversary. He had told me then that it was too ostentatious, a waste of capital. Now, it glittered on the hand of a woman who had been in his life for less than a fiscal quarter. You are cutting me loose like a bad stock, Marcus, I asked softly, watching the light fracture through the diamond. Think of it as cutting losses, Marcus sneered, his mask of civility slipping just an inch to reveal the ruthless traitor beneath. I am betting everything on Sophia's new startup, Novus. I have leveraged the penthouse. I have liquidated the joint retirement accounts. This is the gamble of a lifetime, Elena, and I cannot let your lack of ambition drag me down. He had bet our home, our future, on a girl who thought velocity of capital was a clever catchphrase she likely read on a blog that morning. I stared at the condensation on my water glass. A normal wife would be screaming. A normal wife would be throwing wine. But I was not a normal wife. I was a woman who had hired a forensic accountant 6 months ago when I first smelled her perfume on his collar. I knew about the mortgage. I knew about the drained accounts. I knew about the offshore shell companies. So, you have bet the house. Literally, I asked, feigning a tremor in my voice. Every cent, he said, eyes gleaming with manic greed. Novus is going to be a unicorn. We are going to be billionaires, Elena. Or rather, I am. I picked up the heavy fountain pen he offered. I will sign. On one condition. Marcus exchanged a victorious look with Sophia. Name it. Within reason. I want a clause added. Right here, I said, pointing to the blank space at the bottom of page 4, stating that from this moment forward, any and all debts incurred by either party are the sole responsibility of that party. A complete financial severance of liabilities. I do not want your creditors coming after my meager allowance. Marcus laughed, a dry, barking sound that caused heads to turn at the nearby tables. You are worried about my debt, Elena. You really have no vision. Fine. Write it in. I do not want you claiming a cent of my billions when Novus takes off. I wrote the clause by hand in clear block letters. He initialed it, his hand steady, arrogant. He thought he was shedding dead weight. He had no idea he was severing his only parachute. Done, I whispered, capping the pen and sliding the document back to him. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my sensible skirt. Good luck, Marcus. You are going to need it. I make my own luck, he retorted, already turning back to Sophia, his hand sliding possessively onto her thigh. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool New York night, the heavy door closing behind me with a final, muted thud. I did not cry. I did not look back. I checked my watch. It was 8 o'clock. The Asian markets would open in a few hours, and by then, the game would be mine. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper, revealing the foyer of the penthouse Marcus believed he was renting for $12,000 a month. He often complained about the exorbitant management fees charged by Argos Properties, the shell company listed on the lease. He never once bothered to translate the name from Greek. If he had, he might have learned that Argos was the 100-eyed giant who saw everything. And he certainly never suspected that the sole shareholder of Argos Properties was the woman he had just discarded like a used napkin. I kicked off my heels and walked barefoot across the Italian marble floors. To Marcus, I was Elena the housewife, a former math tutor who dabbled in day trading to pass the time. To the 40% of Wall Street hedge funds that relied on my data streams, I was E.V., the reclusive, ghost-like founder of Nexus Algorithmic. I walked into my home office and locked the door. This was the only room in the house Marcus found boring. He saw screens filled with scrolling numbers and assumed I was playing with pennies, trying to make enough for a new handbag. He never asked what the numbers meant. In 5 years of marriage, not once did he ask about the underlying code. If he had, he would have seen the architecture of a financial empire that dwarfed his own company by a factor of 50. I sat down and placed my hand on the biometric scanner. The screens flared to life, shifting from the decoy interface to the Nexus command center. The blue light washed over my face, stripping away the mask of the submissive wife. I was a prodigy once, a girl who saw patterns where others saw chaos. I built Nexus to find order in the noise of the global markets, but I stepped back from the limelight because I wanted something money could not buy. I wanted a home. I wanted love. God, I was so stupid. I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling slightly. I shook my head, pushing the regret into a locked box in my mind. Now was not the time for sentiment. It was time for liquidation. I picked up the secure line and dialed Julian. He answered on the first ring. Elena. I saw the alert on the shared drive. Did he actually do it? Julian asked, his voice low and sharp. He did, I replied, my voice steady now. He is forcing a divorce. He offered me a pittance, $5,000 a month. The audacity is impressive. I suppose. Julian scoffed. Shall I trigger the disclosure clauses? We can reveal your assets and crush him in court by simply outspending him. No, I said, typing a command into my terminal. He thinks I am poor. He thinks I am weak. Let him keep believing that. I want to trigger the debt recall protocols instead. He just admitted to leveraging the house and his retirement for a project called Novus. Novus. I am looking at the prospectus right now, Julian said, the sound of rapid typing clicking in the background. Elena, this is garbage. It is a buzzword salad. There is no proprietary tech here. It is a money pit. I know, I said, pulling up Marcus's financial profile. It was bleeding red. He is drowning. Julian. He has borrowed against everything, banking on a miracle that does not exist. He used my reputation, my quiet introductions to bankers who only took his calls because they suspected he was connected to EV to build a house of cards. I stared at the screen. I could stop him. I could make one call, reveal my identity, and save him from ruin. I could pay off his debts with the interest my accounts earned in a single week. For a moment, the memory of the man I thought I married flickered in my mind, the man who bought me flowers on a Tuesday, who held me when my mother died. But then I looked at the live feed of his credit cards. 10 minutes ago, a charge for a hotel suite at the Pierre, champagne, caviar. He was celebrating his freedom with Sophia while I sat in the home he mortgaged without my consent. Elena Julian's voice broke my trance. "What are your instructions?" "Let him fall," I said, my voice cold as the algorithms running on my screen. "Do not warn him. Do not block the loans. Let him take every cent he can find and pour it into that black hole. And Julian, start buying up his debt. I want to own every mistake he makes." "Understood." "And the penthouse transfer the deed to the holding company's secondary trust. Eviction notices are automated for non-payment. Correct?" "Yes. If he misses 2 cycles, he is out." "Perfect." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, watching the complex web of global finance pulse and flow across my monitors. Marcus thought he was a shark swimming in a small pond. He had no idea he was swimming in my aquarium. "He wants to play a game of all-in," I whispered, watching a line of code execute a purchase order for his distressed bonds. "Fine. I will be the one dealing the cards." The invitation to the launch party of Novus was printed on heavy cardstock with gold embossing, a desperate attempt to scream luxury that likely cost $12 a unit. Marcus had insisted I attend. He claimed it was to show the world we were conscious uncoupling with grace, but I knew the truth. He wanted me there as a prop. He wanted to parade his young, brilliant mistress in front of his soon-to-be ex-wife to prove he had upgraded. I walked into the ballroom of the Pierre Hotel wearing a gown of midnight blue silk. It was not flashy. It did not have sequins or feathers. It was a vintage piece from a secluded atelier in Paris, the kind of dress that did not have a price tag because if you had to ask, you were not on the list. I saw Sophia's eyes lock onto it immediately. She was wearing a neon pink designer dress that screamed for attention, but as I approached, I saw her recognition flicker. She knew the brand of my dress. She had probably pinned it on her vision board, but even with Marcus's credit card, she could not buy it. You needed a lineage, not just a limit. "Elena, you made it!" Marcus boomed, his face flushed with adrenaline and expensive scotch. He threw an arm around my shoulder, his grip tight and possessive, performing for the circle of investors surrounding him. "Everyone, this is Elena. She has been incredibly supportive of this transition." The men in the circle nodded vaguely, their eyes sliding over me as if I were a piece of furniture. To them, I was just the wife on the way out. They turned back to Marcus, showering him with praise about his disruptive vision and bold new direction. Sophia stepped forward, swirling a martini glass. She linked her arm through Marcus's other side, staking her claim. "It is so brave of you to come, Elena," Sophia said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Honestly, I admire you. I always tell Marcus that in today's world, a woman really needs her own career. It must be so emptying to just wait for a husband to come home and pay the bills. I could never just exist like that." The circle of men chuckled nervously. It was a direct slap, meant to humiliate me publicly. I smiled, a thin, sharp expression that did not reach my eyes. "Ambition is a lovely accessory." "Sophia," I said, my voice soft but cutting clearly through the chatter. "Just be careful you do not mistake spending someone else's capital for generating your own value." Sophia's smile faltered. She opened her mouth to retort, but the air in the room suddenly shifted. A hush rippled through the crowd near the entrance. Arthur Sterling had arrived. Sterling was not just an investor, he was an institution. He controlled one of the largest private equity funds in North America. Marcus had been trying to get a meeting with him for 3 years. Seeing him here was a shock. Marcus practically vibrated with excitement. "Mr. Sterling!" Marcus exclaimed, abandoning Sophia and me to rush forward. "I am honored, truly honored. Welcome to the future of fintech." Sterling, a man in his 60s with eyes like polished steel, ignored Marcus's outstretched hand. He looked past him, scanning the group until his gaze landed on me. He walked straight past Marcus, stopping directly in front of me. "Mrs. Thorne," Sterling said, inclining his head in a gesture of genuine respect. "I was not aware you would be attending. It is a rare privilege." Sterling did not know I was E.V., but he knew I had quietly advised on a portfolio correction for him 4 years ago that saved him $200 million. He knew I was the brain in the room, even if he did not know the extent of it. "Mr. Sterling," I replied, nodding. "It has been a long time." Marcus looked between us, confusion warring with greed. He assumed Sterling was just being a gentleman to the discarded wife. He saw an opening and jumped in, desperate to redirect the attention to himself. Yes, Elena is wonderful," Marcus interjected, stepping between us. "But Mr. Sterling, you are here for Novus. We are looking for a lead investor to close our Series A. I have personally injected $2 million of my own liquid capital to show my commitment." "Why?" Sterling raised an eyebrow. "Your own capital. That is a significant risk for a personal balance sheet." "I believe in it that much," Marcus said, puffing out his chest. "I have leveraged my real estate assets, the penthouse, the vacation home. I went all in." "And your wife?" Sterling asked, glancing at me. "She is comfortable with leveraging the marital home on a speculative startup." The room went silent. This was the moment. By law, he needed my signed consent to mortgage our primary residence. He had forged my signature on the bank documents 3 days ago. I knew it. The bank knew it because my system had flagged it. But Marcus did not know I knew. "Oh, absolutely," Marcus lied, his voice loud and confident. "Elena is 100% on board." She signed the papers with a smile. "She knows Novus is going to change the world." "Right, darling." He looked at me, his eyes wide, silently daring me to contradict him in front of the most powerful man in New York. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. I took a sip of my sparkling water and looked him dead in the eye. "Marcus has always been very creative with his paperwork," I said ambiguously. Marcus laughed, a loud, forced sound, clapping Sterling on the back. "She has such a dry sense of humor. Come, Arthur, let me show you the prototype." As he led Sterling away, believing he had secured the bag, I set my glass down on a passing tray. I did not need to hear any more. He had just publicly admitted to fraud in front of a credible witness. He had claimed I consented to a loan I never signed. It was the final nail. I watched him walk away, his hand on the small of Sophia's back, whispering promises of wealth he did not have. He thought he was closing a deal. In reality, he had just signed his confession. The conference room at Julian's law firm was kept at a precise 68 degrees, a temperature designed to keep minds sharp and negotiations short. I sat on one side of the frosted glass table with Julian, while Marcus and his attorney, a man named Barry with an ill-fitting suit and a nervous tic, sat on the other. Julian slid the asset separation agreement across the table. It was a masterpiece of legal entrapment disguised as a surrender. "Let me get this straight," Barry said, squinting at the document through his wire-rimmed glasses. "Your client is waiving all rights to spousal support. No alimony. No claim on the marital penthouse. Elena just wants to move on," Julian said smoothly, his face a mask of professional indifference. "She values her peace of mind more than a monthly check." Marcus scoffed, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin. He looked at me with pity, interpreting my calculated silence as defeat. "I always said you were not cut out for the fight." "Elena," Marcus said, shaking his head. "But hey, if you want to walk away with nothing, I am not going to stop you. It is actually kind of sad. "There is one condition," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I pointed to Clause 14b. "I am willing to sign over my interest in your current company, Thorn Logistics. In exchange, you assume full sole liability for all debts associated with the Novus project. I want my name off those loans. Marcus. I cannot sleep at night knowing the bank could come for my parents' old furniture." Marcus laughed aloud. He exchanged a look with Barry, who shrugged. To them, it was the deal of the century. They believed Novus was about to revolutionize the market, making Thorn Logistics look like a dinosaur. What Marcus had forgotten, or perhaps never truly understood, was that the only reason Thorn Logistics had any valuation at all was due to a predictive shipping algorithm I had written and patented under the company's name 4 years ago. It was the engine of his success, and he was about to keep the shell while taking on a mountain of toxic debt. "You have got a deal," Marcus said, uncapping his pen. "I take the debt. You take your freedom." He signed the papers with a flourish. The scratch of the pen against the paper sounded like a guillotine blade dropping, but only I could hear it. As soon as we left the building, the real work began. I returned to my command center. The moment the ink was dry, Julian filed the papers. Legally, I was now severed from his liabilities. "Execute Phase 2, I told Julian over the headset. On my screens, I watched the financial noose tighten. Sophia, panicked by the burn rate of the Novus launch party, had convinced Marcus to liquidate his blue-chip stocks to generate cash. It was a rookie move. "He is dumping equity," I murmured, watching the trade alerts flash red. "He is exposing himself." I typed in a command sequence. Through a series of offshore intermediaries, I began pulling capital from the 3 major investment funds that provided Thorn Logistics with its operating credit. These funds were guided by Nexus data. When Nexus flagged a company as high risk, the money vanished. Within 48 hours, the first domino fell. "Mr. Thorn, this is First National," I imagined the banker saying as I watched the credit line status flip from active to frozen on my monitor. "Due to recent volatility and the leverage ratio on your new venture, we are unable to extend your revolving credit." Marcus was bleeding cash. His operational accounts were drying up. He needed money to pay the developers for Novus and the suppliers for Thorn Logistics. I hacked into the security feed of his office. I saw him pacing, sweat staining the armpits of his expensive shirt. He was yelling into his phone. "What do you mean, denied? I have been a client for 10 years. Look, I just need a bridge loan. 2 weeks. That is all." He slammed the phone down. He looked at Sophia, who was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, looking bored rather than concerned. "We need more cash," Sophia said, not looking up. "My developers are threatening to walk if the wire does not hit by Friday." "I know," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking. "I am handling it." He was not handling it. He was drowning. Desperate to maintain the illusion of success for Sophia and the world, he made the fatal mistake I had anticipated. He opened a browser window and navigated to a site for high-risk private lending. Sharks. I watched him fill out the application for a $500,000 loan at an interest rate of 25%. He was hiding the collapse from me, thinking he could fix it before I noticed. I took a sip of my tea, the warmth spreading through my chest. The trap was not just set, it had already snapped shut. "Checkmate," I whispered to the screen. The front door slammed against the wall at 2 a.m, shattering the silence of the apartment. I sat in the living room, a single lamp illuminating the book I was not actually reading. Marcus stumbled in, the stench of stale whiskey and desperation trailing behind him like a physical shadow. He looked at me, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused, and I saw not a husband, but a man hunting for a scapegoat. "It is you," Marcus slurred, pointing a shaking finger at me. "It is this heavy energy you bring into this house. You are a black cloud, Elena. I cannot think. I cannot breathe." He kicked off his shoes, sending one flying into the expensive vase by the console table. It did not break, but the sound was ugly and jarring. "You are drunk, Marcus," I said, closing my book calmly. "I am clear," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I am finally clear, and I know what I need. I need space, real creative space. Sophia, she needs a place to work on the launch, a war room." He loomed over me, trying to be intimidating, but he just looked pathetic. "I want you out," he spat. "Sooner than the agreement says. Tomorrow. I want you out tomorrow. Take your bad juju with you." I stood up slowly. I did not argue. I did not plead. "Fine," I said. "I will be gone by noon." The next morning, I packed with the precision of a surgeon. I took only the clothes I had purchased with the small allowance he gave me, or the money I made from tutoring before the marriage. I left the designer coats he bought me for photo ops. I left the jewelry he gave me as apologies for missed anniversaries. On the marble console table in the hallway, I placed 2 items. First, my wedding band. Second, a thick, sealed cream envelope. Inside was not a love letter, but a copy of the lease termination notice from Argos Properties, effective in 30 days. It was my parting gift, a countdown clock he could not see yet. I walked out the door and did not look back. By the following afternoon, my security alerts informed me that Sophia had moved in. Through the digital receipts linked to the household account which Marcus had forgotten to revoke, I watched her nesting process. She spent $12,000 on new Italian furniture and another $4,000 on energy-cleansing crystals. She was redecorating the Titanic while it was already taking on water. But the real crash happened 3 days later. I was sitting in the leather seat of a Gulfstream G650, cruising at 45,000 feet. I was en route to Silicon Valley for a board meeting with a tech giant that wanted to license Nexus technology. My phone on the tray table lit up. It was Marcus. I let it ring. It stopped, then rang again immediately. And again. Finally. A voicemail notification popped up. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and pressed play. Marcus's voice filled my ears, distorted by panic and rage. "Elena, pick up the phone. Are you happy now? Did you do something? Did you talk to the press?" There was a crashing sound in the background, like glass shattering. The prototype. It froze. It crashed during the beta demo. "The code is garbage. The investors are pulling out. Elena, they are all walking away. This is your fault. You jinxed us." His breath was ragged, coming in short. Sharp gasps. "I need liquidity. The bank won't extend the line without a guarantor. I need you to come back and sign as a co-borrower. Just for a month, Elena. Do not do this to me. I know you are there." The message ended with a strangled sob that he tried to disguise as a cough. I took off the headphones and looked out the window. Below me, the clouds looked like a soft, white floor separating me from the chaos of the world below. I took a sip of chilled, sparkling water. Marcus was losing his mind. He was screaming into the void, demanding a lifeline from the very person he had cut loose. He did not realize that I was not just ignoring him. I was already flying above him, in a stratosphere he could never reach. I deleted the voicemail. The game was entering its endgame, and I had a meeting to attend. The subpoena arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a process server who looked bored with the destruction he was handing out. Marcus was being sued by First National for default on the bridge loan. His lawyer, Barry, sat in the office that now smelled of fear and stale coffee, holding a single sheet of paper like it was a treasure map. "It is not all bad news." "Marcus," Barry said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I received an inquiry this morning. A private equity trust. They are interested in distressed assets with high upside. They want to hear a pitch for Novus." Who are they?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. He looked like a man who had not slept in a week. "They call themselves the Nemesis Trust," Barry replied. "Offshore capital. Very private. Deep pockets. They are offering a lifeline. Marcus. A full buyout of the debt in exchange for equity." Marcus slammed his hand on the desk, a spark of his old arrogance returning. "I knew it. I knew the vision was too good to fail. Nemesis. Powerful name. They see the potential. He did not know his Greek mythology. If he had, he would have remembered that Nemesis was the goddess of divine retribution against those who succumb to hubris. Across town, in the quiet sanctuary of my office, I was finalizing the kill. The valuation is in the toilet. Elena, Julian said, reviewing the file. If Nemesis makes an offer now, we can pick up his entire life's work for 10 cents on the dollar. Do it, I said, staring at the cityscape. But the paperwork needs to be airtight. I want the transfer of ownership to be immediate upon signature. Later that afternoon, I met with Arthur Sterling in a private room at the St. Regis. He looked at me with polite curiosity, wondering why the ex-wife of a failing entrepreneur had requested his time. Mr. Sterling, I know you are wary of the Thorne name right now, I began, placing a tablet on the table. But I am not here as Mrs. Thorne. I am here to correct a misconception. I unlocked the screen and navigated to the back end of the Nexus interface. I typed in my biometric key. The screen flooded with the proprietary data streams that Sterling's own firm paid millions to access. Wait, Sterling whispered, his eyes widening behind his glasses. This is the source. You have admin access, I built it. Arthur, I said softly. I am E.V. Sterling sat back, stunned. He looked from me to the screen and back again. My God, the algorithm that predicted the 2020 crash. That was you and Marcus. Does he know he thinks I am good at balancing a checkbook? I replied dryly. I am taking back what is mine tomorrow. I need to know where you stand. Sterling reached out and shook my hand, his grip firm. I stand with competence. Elena. Always. While I was securing alliances, Marcus was stripping himself bare. He sold his Aston Martin that afternoon for cash. He pawned his Patek Philippe watch, the one I gave him for his 30th birthday, to pay for the catering and rental of a conference room for the Nemesis meeting. He came home to the penthouse, which was now filled with half-packed boxes as the eviction date loomed. Sophia was sitting on a pile of luggage, filing her nails aggressively. We have the meeting, Marcus said, trying to sound triumphant. Nemesis is going to save us. Babe, we just need to nail the presentation. You sold the car, Sophia asked, her voice sharp and cold. I had to take an Uber here. Marcus, an Uber. This is humiliation. I did not sign up for poverty. It is an investment, Marcus pleaded, reaching for her hand. But she pulled away. Once Nemesis signs, we will buy 10 cars. Just stick with me. I am sticking, Sophia muttered, looking at her phone. For now. I watched the interaction through the security camera feed on my phone. The cracks were not just forming, they were becoming canyons. I opened my messaging app and typed a single line to Marcus. See you at the meeting tomorrow? I saw him check his phone on the screen. He frowned, showing the screen to Sophia. Look at this. He scoffed. She knows I have a big meeting. She is sniffing around for money. She probably wants me to pay her rent. Block her, Sophia said. Better yet, Marcus said, a cruel sneer returning to his face. I will call security at the venue. If she shows up trying to make a scene or beg for scraps, I want her thrown out on the sidewalk. I need Nemesis to see I have cut all ties with the dead weight. I put my phone down and smiled. He was right about one thing. He had definitely cut ties. He just didn't realize he had cut the rope holding him over the abyss. The air in the boardroom on the 40th floor of the Apex Holdings Tower was so thin it felt like breathing through a straw. Outside, the New York sky was a flat, unforgiving gray, mirroring the mood inside. Marcus sat at the long mahogany table, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests of his chair. Opposite him, Sophia was frantically checking her reflection in her compact mirror, applying yet another layer of lipstick to mask the tremor in her lower lip. Stop fidgeting, Marcus snapped, his voice tight. They will be here any minute. We need to look. We need to look invincible. Sophia. I am trying, Marcus, Sophia hissed back, snapping the compact shut. But you told me we had 3 months of runway left. Yesterday. The card was declined when I tried to buy a latte. A latte. Marcus. If Nemesis does not sign today, what are we going to do? They will sign, Marcus said, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. They have to. Novus is the future. The intercom on the table buzzed, a harsh, electronic sound that made both of them jump. Mr. Thorne, the receptionist's voice crackled through the speaker. Security is reporting an issue at the main elevator bank. There is a woman demanding entry. She claims she has a meeting with you. Marcus's face twisted into a sneer of pure vindication. He looked at Sophia and laughed. A dry, humorless bark. I told you, he said. It is Elena. She came crawling back. She probably wants to beg for her allowance back. He leaned over the intercom button. Tell security to remove her. If she resists, tell them to drag her out. I do not want her anywhere near this floor. Sir, wait. The receptionist's voice came back, sounding breathless and terrified. The building manager just called. He says we cannot stop her. He says she is the new owner of the building. Before Marcus could process the words, the heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open with a force that rattled the glass walls. It was not security. Julian walked in first, looking sharper and more predatory than I had ever seen him. Behind him flowed a stream of 6 lawyers, all dressed in charcoal suits, carrying identical black briefcases. They moved with the synchronized precision of a firing squad taking position. And then, I walked in. I was not wearing the beige cardigans Marcus preferred. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal pinstripe suit tailored to within an inch of its life, paired with 4-inch stilettos that clicked rhythmically against the floor like a ticking clock. My hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was loose and sleek, framing a face that held zero warmth. Marcus and Sophia froze. Their mouths hung slightly open, their eyes darting around the room as if searching for a camera crew, convinced this was some elaborate prank. Elena, Marcus whispered, half rising from his chair. What are you wearing? Did you come here to try and embarrass me in front of the investors? I did not look at him. I did not acknowledge his existence. I walked past him, the scent of my perfume a sharp, cold fragrance trailing behind me. I walked straight to the head of the table, the seat reserved for the chairman of the board. Sophia gasped as I pulled the chair out and sat down, crossing my legs and placing my phone face up on the table. You are in the wrong seat. Elena, Sophia said, her voice trembling. That is for the representative from Nemesis. You need to get up before they get up, Marcus shouted, slamming his hand on the table, his face turning a blotchy red. Are you insane? You cannot just barge in here dressed like that. Get out before I call the police. I leaned back in the chair, resting my elbows on the armrests and steeping my fingers together. I looked at Julian and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Julian stepped forward and dropped a heavy leather binder onto the table. The thud echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. Mr. Thorne, Ms. Ricci, Julian said, his voice cold and devoid of any sympathy. Please lower your voices. You are currently screaming at the sole proprietor of the Nemesis Trust, and, by extension, the holder of 100% of your outstanding debt. The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the air conditioning unit seemed to roar in the sudden vacuum. I watched Sophia's throat work as she swallowed hard, the color draining from her face until she looked like a ghost. Marcus stood frozen, his mouth still open in mid-shout, his eyes locked on mine, waiting for the punchline that would never come. Shall we begin? I asked, my voice calm, level, and utterly terrifying. Marcus stared at me for a long, agonizing second before he threw his head back and laughed. It was a manic, fractured sound that bounced off the glass walls, sounding more like a scream than mirth. He wiped a tear from his eye, shaking his head at Sophia. "You almost had me," Marcus gasped, pointing a shaking finger at Julian. "This is a setup, a prank. Who hired you? Was it the guys at the club? Is this because of the poker game?" He turned to me, his eyes wide and wild. "And you, dressing up like a CEO. It is cute, Elena. Really. But the game is over. Get out." I did not blink. I simply raised 2 fingers to Julian. Without a word, Julian tapped the tablet connected to the room's main projector. The lights dimmed automatically, and the massive screen behind me roared to life. "Let us look at the financials. Shall we?" I said, my voice cutting through his laughter like a scalpel. Slide 1 appeared. It was a complex flowchart tracing the liquidity of the Thorne household over the last 5 years. "You always believed we lived on your genius." "Marcus," I said, pointing to the green line that represented our income. "You thought those monthly deposits into the joint account were from a slow-drip inheritance from my great-aunt. But my great-aunt died penniless in 1999. Marcus squinted at the screen. "Then, where did the money come from?" "Me," I replied. "That was yield. Dividends from a blind trust I established before we even met." "You have not been supporting a helpless housewife." "Marcus, I have been subsidizing a failing entrepreneur." Sophia made a small, choking sound. She looked at the numbers, her eyes doing the math. She realized she had been sleeping with the charity case, not the benefactor. Julian tapped the screen again. "Slide 2. And this," I continued, standing up and walking slowly toward the screen. "This is the source code for the logistics engine that powers Thorne Logistics. The proprietary tech you claim is your brainchild." I pointed to the timestamp in the metadata. 2018, the year we met. "I wrote this code on a napkin at a diner while you were complaining about shipping routes. I typed it up for you that night as a gift. You forgot, didn't you? You told yourself you invented it. But the patent filing," I looked at Julian, "registered to a holding company fully owned by Elena Vance." Julian clarified, his voice monotone. Marcus sank back into his chair, his face turning the color of ash. "No, that is impossible. I built this company. I am the visionary. You are the mascot," I corrected him. Julian tapped the screen a final time. Slide 3. This one was ugly. It showed a series of wire transfers highlighted in neon red. And finally, the breach of contract, I said, turning to look at Sophia. The asset separation agreement stated clearly that no joint assets were to be used for the Novus project. But here we have $75,000 wired to a contractor for office aesthetics. And here, $20,000 for a consulting fee paid to a personal account owned by Sophia Ricci. Sophia recoiled as if I had slapped her. She looked at Marcus, horror dawning on her face. "You said it was your money," Sophia screamed, her voice shrill. "You said you were liquid. I am," Marcus stammered, looking between her and the screen. I moved some things around. It is accounting. It is all for the future." "There is no future." "Marcus," I said, leaning over the table, my palms flat against the mahogany. "You said you did not want to bet your life on me. The reality is, you never had a future without me. I was the floor you stood on. I was the ceiling that kept the rain out. And you took a sledgehammer to the foundation." Marcus looked at me, his eyes pleading. The arrogance finally stripped away to reveal the terrified boy beneath. "Elena, baby." "Listen," he wheezed, reaching a hand out across the table. "I did it for us. Don't you see I wanted to be big enough for you? I wanted to be the man you deserved. We can fix this. We can combine forces Nexus and Novus. Think of the synergy. We can rule this city." I looked at his hand. It was trembling. "There is no us. Marcus," I said softly. "There is only you and your massive, fragile ego." I straightened up and buttoned my jacket. Julian, execute the call option. With pleasure, Julian said. I am hereby calling in the debt, I announced, looking Marcus dead in the eye. Under the terms of the acquisition of your liabilities by the Nemesis Trust, and due to your default on the primary loan covenants proven by these unauthorized transfers, the entire sum is due immediately. If you cannot pay, and we know you cannot, I am exercising my right to seize collateral. Collateral, Marcus whispered. What collateral? Everything, I said. The company, the brand, the office equipment, the chair you are sitting in. I paused, letting the weight of it crush him. And since you signed over your equity in Thorn Logistics to avoid the Novus debt, I own that too. I turned to walk away, leaving him in the ruins of the life he thought he built. Game over. Marcus. Julian adjusted his glasses and looked down at the document with the dispassionate air of a coroner pronouncing a time of death. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Julian announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. The Nemesis Trust has exercised its right to seize all collateral. This includes the controlling interest in Apex Holdings, the intellectual property of Novus, and, due to the personal guarantee you signed, Mr. Thorn, your remaining liquid assets and personal property. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sharp scrape of a chair against the floor. Sophia stood up so fast she nearly knocked her water glass over. The arrogance that had defined her since the moment I met her evaporated, replaced by the primal instinct of a rat sensing the ship going down. She looked at Marcus not with love, or even pity, but with absolute disgust. I did not know, Sophia stammered, backing away from the table, her hands raised in surrender. I was just an employee. I was deceived. He told me he had the capital. He lied to me just like he lied to everyone else. Sophia, Marcus croaked, reaching out a hand toward her. Sophia, wait. We can figure this out. Do not touch me, she shrieked, recoiling as if he were contagious. I am not going down for your fraud. Marcus, I am calling my lawyer. I am a victim here. She grabbed her designer bag paid for with my money and sprinted for the door. Her heels clacked frantically against the floor as she fled, not once looking back at the man she had promised to build an empire with. Marcus sat frozen, his hand still suspended in the air. He watched the door swing shut, the vibration settling into stillness. Then, slowly, he turned his head to look at me. The anger was gone. The bluster was gone. In its place was a naked, terrifying realization that he was entirely alone. He slid out of his chair. It was a clumsy, heavy movement. To the shock of the room, he did not stand. He sank to his knees on the plush carpet, right beside my chair. Elena, he whispered, his voice cracking. Ellie, please. It was the nickname he used to call me when we were dating, back when we ate takeout on the floor of his studio apartment. Hearing it now, in this boardroom, felt like a violation. Do not call me that, I said, my voice ice cold. I am sorry. He babbled, tears streaming down his face, ruining his expensive shirt. I messed up. I know I messed up. But 10 years. Elena, 10 years of marriage. Does that mean nothing I am your husband? Please, do not destroy me. Give me a chance. I will work for you. I will take a demotion. Just do not kick me out on the street. I looked down at him. I searched my heart for a flicker of sympathy, a spark of the love I once held for him. I found nothing. It was like looking at a stranger or a character in a movie I had lost interest in. The man I married died the day he decided his wife was a bad investment, I said. I looked up toward the glass walls of the conference room. The blinds were open. Outside, the senior staff of Apex Holdings, the CFO, the CTO, the heads of departments were gathered. They had been invited to witness the transition. They saw their mighty leader on his knees, begging his ex-wife for mercy. They did not look horrified. They looked relieved. I reached into the folder Julian had placed in front of me and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Stand up, Marcus," I commanded. "You are making a scene." He scrambled to his feet, wiping his face, a flicker of hope in his eyes. You will give me a chance." "No," I said. I picked up a pen and signed the bottom of the document with a flourish. I spun the paper around and slid it toward him. "This is your termination notice," I stated flatly. "Effective immediately. You are stripped of your title, your salary, and your security clearance. You are trespassing on company property." Marcus stared at the paper, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "But who will run the company?" he whispered. "You cannot run it. You do not know the operations." "Actually, she does," a deep voice said from the doorway. We all turned. A man in a sharp navy suit walked in. It was David Chen, a former VP of operations at a major logistics firm, someone I had headhunted weeks ago. "David is the new CEO of Apex Holdings," I announced. "He understands that a company is built on data and respect, not ego and debt." David nodded to me, then turned to Marcus with a professional, dismissive nod. "Security!" David called out calmly. 2 burly guards in uniform stepped into the room. They had been waiting. "Please escort Mr. Thorne to the lobby," David instructed. "He is permitted 1 small box for personal items. Anything digital remains company property." "No. No, you cannot do this," Marcus shouted as the guards grabbed his arms. He struggled, his feet dragging against the carpet. The image of the golden boy shattered into 1,000 pathetic pieces. "Elena," he screamed one last time, his voice echoing down the hallway. "Elena." I did not flinch. I did not look away. I sat perfectly still at the head of the table, the undisputed queen of the board, watching the garbage being taken out. From the floor-to-ceiling glass of the 40th floor, the people on the street below looked like insects scurrying for cover. It had started to rain, a heavy, cleansing downpour that turned the gray New York streets into slick rivers of obsidian. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, looking down at the tiny, solitary figure standing on the sidewalk. Even from this height, I knew it was him. Marcus stood motionless in the deluge, clutching a soggy cardboard box to his chest. He looked small. He looked fragile. The titan of industry, the man who thought he could conquer the world with a smile and a line of credit, was now just another wet, miserable pedestrian without an umbrella. I waited for the rush of vindictive joy. I waited for the urge to laugh, to point, to celebrate his ruin, but it never came. Instead, I felt something far more profound. I felt lighter. It was as if a physical weight, a heavy stone I had been carrying strapped to my chest for 5 years, had suddenly been cut loose. My lungs expanded, filling with air that tasted not of revenge, but of peace. I turned away from the window, leaving Marcus to the rain. He was the past. I had a future to manage. I walked back toward the conference table. The room was buzzing with a different kind of energy now. The fear was gone, replaced by the sharp, electric focus of professionals who knew they were finally in capable hands. David, the new CEO, was already issuing directives to the department heads, his voice calm and authoritative. When I approached the head of the table, the room fell silent. It was a silence of respect. Julian stepped up beside me, closing his briefcase with a satisfying click. "We have enough evidence to bury him." "Elena," Julian said quietly, so only I could hear. "The fraud, the forgery of your signature on the bank documents, the embezzlement of company funds for personal use. I can have the district attorney on the phone in 10 minutes. We can put him away for 5 to 10 years. I looked at the empty chair where Marcus had sat only 20 minutes ago. I imagined him in a prison cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit, blaming everyone but himself. It felt unnecessary. It felt like giving him more of my time, more of my energy. I shook my head slowly. No, I said firmly. No charges. Julian raised an eyebrow. Surprised. You are letting him walk. After everything he did, prison would be too easy for him. I replied, a small, cold smile touching my lips. In prison, he can play the victim. He can tell himself he was martyred by a vindictive ex-wife. No, Julian. I want him out there. I want him to wake up every single morning in a cheap apartment, look in the mirror, and know that he had it all. I want him to live the next 40 years as a nobody, haunted by the knowledge that he held a winning lottery ticket in his hand and set it on fire because of his own ego. That is the true punishment. Julian nodded slowly, a look of understanding crossing his face. A life of regret. It is cruel. I like it. It is justice. I corrected. I picked up my bag. David, the company is yours to run. Report to me weekly. I have a plane to catch. Yes, Ms. Vance, David said, standing up as I passed. I walked out of the boardroom, down the long hallway, and into the elevator. As the numbers counted down to the lobby, I checked my reflection in the polished metal doors. I did not see the tired, betrayed housewife anymore. I saw Elena Vance. I saw E.V. When the elevator doors slid open, the lobby was a chaotic sea of flashing lights. The news had leaked. The financial blogs had connected the dots between the mysterious owner of the Nemesis Trust and the founder of Nexus Algorithmic. They knew E.V. was a woman. They knew she was here. A dozen reporters pushed against the velvet ropes, shouting questions. Ms. Vance, is it true you own the building? Elena, did you orchestrate the hostile takeover of your husband's company? What is your comment on the collapse of Novus? For the first time in my life, I did not lower my head. I did not look for a side exit. I reached into my purse and took off my dark sunglasses, folding them deliberately. I walked straight through the double doors and out onto the wet pavement. The rain had stopped, leaving the city glistening and fresh. The flashes of the cameras erupted like lightning, blinding and bright. I looked directly into the lens of the nearest camera. I did not scowl. I did not hide. I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and come out forged in steel. A sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. The driver opened the door. I slid into the leatherback seat, the sanctuary of silence enveloping me once again. Where to? Ms. Vance, the driver asked. The airport, I said, leaning back and closing my eyes. And then, anywhere I want. I did not look out the window to see if Marcus was still there. I did not care. He was a footnote in a chapter I had just finished writing. As the car pulled away, merging into the stream of traffic, I felt the hum of the engine vibrate through the soles of my shoes. The game was over, and I was the only one left standing. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment down below and let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that like button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.